afternoon or evening, whatever it happens to be. My name is Rick Murray, and I am the Managing Partner of Shift Communications in the US. And I'd like to thank the organizers at SPECTRA for inviting me to be part of what is a really exceptional agenda and a slate of speakers that you'll be hearing from over the course of the conference. My topic today is the evolution of digital storytelling. And I've been around for a lot of it, as you can imagine. But I'm not sure I'm going to tell you, because of the speakers you're hearing from, anything that you don't necessarily know. So I'm going to share a lot of stories as we go through this, and hopefully leave you with a couple of kernels that you find of value once we're done. So PR used to be a lot easier. Easier said than done, I guess. But it's funny, if you think back 25 years ago, which is when I got into public relations, a field I got into entirely by accident, because I was playing golf one day with a friend of mine who invited a third, Al Golan, to be part of the group. And Al was talking to me about what was going on at Golan Harris at the time, and I shared what I was doing, which was helping to turn around a media production company. And we were dabbling in early things, early days of the web with brochureware. We were developing some multimedia-based training and communications programs, and so on. And Al said, "That sounds fascinating. You should come do that for me." And so I did. And I got into PR 25 years ago. For the first 10 or so, I was the non-PR guy in the PR agency. They'd call me into brainstorms and say, what do you think about this? And think a little bit outside the box, because I was running the quote unquote creative teams, if you will, at Golan. A position I later took on at another firm, Edelman, that I worked for a few years, quite a few. Anyhow, long story short, I was the non-PR guy in the industry. But as time went on, and as word of mouth marketing started to take hold, and as the sort of social media was introduced bit by bit, PR went from being in the business of shaping a story by working through journalists to deliver a message to the public, to actually telling a story, and more. But it was more than that 10-year evolution. So we'll go through a little bit as we go. So what happened? As I mentioned a second ago, first thing happened is the world got social. And for those of you that were around back then, you may remember Friendster. I certainly remember MySpace in the early days that we were playing with that, with both Xbox and Axe. We remember, early days of Twitter and things like Facebook coming to the market bit by bit. And it was fascinating because basically between that and the blogging community, which was at that time just 7 million people globally, you had a community building up, purely organic communication, where we actually democratized basically the right to publish, and we made it free. And so more and more people were taking part in it organically, following interests, following their pursuits, looking and engaging with people who were just like them and had interests and likes just like them. I remember a time, and this was MySpace, might have had 7 million members. And so I plugged in what my interests were. And I said, I'm interested in great food, great wine, playing guitar, the Grateful Dead, and a few other things. And I said, there's no one in the world just like me, and lo and behold, there were plenty of people on MySpace at that time that were just like me in terms of interest. But a lot happened since that time, and it's had a dramatic impact on all of us as a result. The organic community that built up went away, all through monetization and the lovely term advertising or paid media, or whatever you want to call it. In that organic community that we all trusted one another, we policed one another, we made sure that conversations were civil, and that you were able to actually make friends out there, not for money, but because you had something in common, and that you wanted to support. So it was a very different time in that stage of social media. So first thing we did, we got social. The next thing we did, we went mobile. And again, those of you that can remember the early days of mobile phones, BlackBerry was the thing. You know, we all had these big, heavy things before that from Motorola and so on. But BlackBerry had actually made small smartphones cool. And yes, they had a captive operating system and so on. And at the time, by the way, full disclosure, I was running the global BlackBerry business for this other firm. But what we found there was that, you know, you could actually go from being just email and text to running a few apps and getting engaged. And then the iPhone was introduced in 2007. And then Android came out shortly thereafter. And all of a sudden, BlackBerry had competition. But more importantly than that, I think the world discovered the importance of mobility. Because rather than one laptop per child, we now had the ability to have computing in our hand and go with us wherever we were. So that was the beginning of the sort of the unchaining, if you will, from us to sort of the desktop and the wired world as we know it. And we went from the wired world to the wireless world. But the phone market didn't really take off because we have social media a lot of credit, and we give the phone market a lot, you know, we give mobility a lot of credit. But the phone market really didn't take off, and mobility didn't really take off until the infrastructure existed for us to actually do more than text, for us to do more than very simple apps. And so as phones got bigger and more powerful, at the same time, the telecom companies around the world were investing in 3G technology, then 4G technology, now 5G technology, such that things got faster and faster and faster. And so the opportunity that we now have to download a movie in seconds simply didn't exist. I mean, I started off on computers literally when we were thinking about things as over modems that ran at 32 kps. Crazy. Now we're at a gig, 10 gigs per second. It's just absolutely phenomenal what is capable in terms of power and what that's enabled us to do. But then a funny thing happened. And it's totally counter to any kind of economic theory you can think about. As things got faster and faster and more powerful, they became more affordable. And so the cost to basically move data around has decreased dramatically, exponentially over the past decade, and to the point where literally, I think it's about a 200-fold decrease in terms of cost to move that data from point A to point B. And most of those costs have been passed, savings have been passed along to consumers, to businesses. So all of a sudden, we now have this portable computer in our pocket that is capable of doing amazing things with most of us on, or many of us on, unlimited data plans. We're data plans that are significantly more affordable. And while we may complain about our phone bill, the reality is the amount of data that we are using as individuals has also gone up. I mean, consider this slide here. So as data got cheaper and cheaper, we started using more and more of it. Our phone plans were adjusted to do that. We kept buying more and more powerful phones. The phone plans were adjusted over time, so that made it more affordable for us to do. And all of a sudden, we go from sort of not being able to or being afraid to share a lot of data to where we are now sharing amazing amounts of data. I mean, consider this chart right here. The consumption of data, it's just gone. It basically follows the speed curve in terms of the bandwidth that's available for us to move it. So we are filling the pipes as technology allows us to, but we're filling them with video, we're filling them with social media, and we're filling them with images and other things that basically show how we're consuming content today is radically different. We're using an absolute ton of it. And consider this, and I don't know who said the first point as they look at this, but every single day now, and for the past several years, this has been true. Every single day, we are creating and sharing more data than ever before. like in all of mankind. We're sharing more and more data than ever before, which is stunning to me. Every single day is a new personal record. Phenomenal. So let's get back to the storytelling piece. The reality is, not everything is growing. And again, you've heard a lot of this before. You've probably heard all of it before. But this, to me, is the curve that we need to consider, right? It wasn't social media, it wasn't mobility, it wasn't speed. It's a combination of all of the above and affordability that enabled us to become digital storytellers in the truest sense of the word. What's happened, though, is that the economic model driving all of this, okay, the model that is basically having us think through this in an advertising lens, has taken the authenticity out of so much of what's going on in social media. Not everything is growing. Think about it. You've got wire lines, cable subscriptions, TV, print, and radio audiences, no matter where you are. Journalistic objectivity. Okay, as the community has gone from organic to paid, we're finding niche audiences and targeting those audiences with messages they want to hear. So you don't get the media that as news that it is, you get the media you want to hear the way you want to hear it, with the opinions that are factored in there. News cycles aren't growing, they're shrinking, they're collapsed, gone. Privacy isn't shrinking. And attention spans also not shrinking. So if you think about all that content that's being consumed and created and consumed and shared, okay, and then think about that and say, okay, great, what does that mean? And if the average person, and I can't speak for India, but I have seen a stat in the US. This is the average person is being exposed to more than 3,000 messages a day. Like, back to storytelling. Our jobs as storytellers is to break through. So the real challenge is, how do we do that? The other thing I'll mention is that, we're tasked with breaking through, and tasked with breaking through in what are truly unprecedented times. Now, I created this presentation in early October. 3 weeks later, I'm on a conference with one of our clients, and the CEO is speaking and talking about basically a triple crisis that we have going on right now. We've got a crisis in health, which we all know. That crisis in health has led to a crisis in the economy. And the third crisis is one of justice and equity, and that is global. And so we've got three things that we're trying to deal with here. And all of those things are forcing us to consider and reconsider decisions about how we go to market, what we do, and what we say. You think about it, and this, the scary thing in all this year, when the pandemic has taken front and center of our news, of our lives, and continues to and will continue to for the foreseeable future. You think about that and say, climate change has kind of fallen off the radar. Is it any less important today than it was 7 months ago? No. But it's not where the media is focusing their attention. And I think this is what we'll start to see happen in the next year, is a return to things of normalcy, of living to a degree with a pandemic that will not be controlled until there's a vaccine. Yet knowing full well that we can't put off decisions of health, we can't put off decisions that are economic, we can't put off decisions that are climate related or so on. So we now have to figure out how we're going to work in exactly what that looks like. So what now? What do we do? It's the end of the year. We're all going through planning cycles. We're all, with all our clients that thrived during the pandemic, clients that almost went out of business in the pandemic. And we're all asking the same questions. Where are we, and what do we do next to ensure that, we don't just survive going forward, but we actually survive and make money, and that we do the things that we know we need to do to succeed. Our business as communicators has not changed in forever. It's an art, it's a science. But our business remains fundamentally the same. We are here to change how people think, how they feel, and how they act. And yes, we can do that through earned media, and we can do that through paid media, and we can do that through any number of channels anywhere in the world. Our business hasn't changed, period. And it won't change anytime soon. The real challenge for communicators today is how you break through that noise, that 3,000 signals a day that people are getting, that they're being interrupted with, that they're being bombarded with, and how we break through that to reach, to engage, and to inspire the people that are so important to us, okay, whoever they happen to be. But doing that is part art and part science. And I think fundamentally, this is how PR has shifted, I say, or is in the process of shifting today from where it has been historically. We have never, ever been a numbers-focused profession. And those days are over. At Shift, everything that we do, and I mean everything, is informed by data, crafted with passion, and distributed with precision. That is the challenge of public relations today. That is the challenge in front of every single one of us, because we have to change. We've got to think about things about saying, how you take your analytical mind and that thinking, fuse it with your creative mind, and deliver a message that breaks through the clutter to connect with the person that you need to connect with when they want to get that message. Because essentially, we've gone to an information on demand society where the people that we're trying to connect with have an expectation of personal messaging. They have an expectation of whatever they consume, whenever they choose to consume it, being relevant to them. So our job as communicators is to figure out what that is, where it's important to get them, how it's important to find them. We have to ask smarter questions to get at the data that then allows us to tell the story with passion, with empathy, with emotion that lets us get through. What our data tells us is to focus on what matters. And that sounds perhaps overly simplistic, but I'll tell you a story. In 2005, I was at a dinner, lucky enough to be at a dinner with the CEO of CBS at the time, a guy named Andy Hayward. And he was delivering a post-dinner talk to a small group, and he came out with this line that has then been parlayed a number of times ever since, which is that, in today's day and age, that was 20 years, 15 years ago. In today's day and age, every company is a media company. We have to all be publishers. We all have to be thinking about things through a media lens as a business. Fast forward 5 years or so, every company is a tech company. So you're now a media company and a tech company. Thinking about digital transformation. How am I going to take my business and everything that I do and adapt it to an ever-changing world? A trend that continues to this day, especially with the integration of AI into so many aspects of all we do. Today, with the pandemic, and thinking about the way that has sort of dramatically impacted people's lives at work, at home, everything that they do. Every company is also fundamentally a health company. We have to take the health of our customers, our stakeholders, our employees, everybody into consideration in all that we do. So we're a media tech company, a tech company, and a health company. And I would argue that because all the data is pointing us also to doing something that matters, every company is a purpose company. Not a cause marketing company, not a company that sort of touts the fact that they're purpose driven, but one whose actions and behaviors are truly designed to benefit the world as a whole, that move us powerfully forward against something that is important to them, that is important to their stakeholders, and that will ultimately do better for the world. Lofty as hell. Not a lot of companies are there yet. More and more are thinking about it. And it's the right thing to do. I was asked a question about that recently. It says, why are we doing this? Because it's what's right. You can't half bake it. But I will say that the challenge with this entire approach is one where we as PR practitioners, as communications professionals, we have to embrace a world that we're not used to. We have to embrace a world that is frankly scary to us. I'll explain why. Ten years ago, was at a setting and chatting with a colleague of mine. And I think we were talking a lot about accountability and communications back then. And he came up with this line. I won't give you his name because I don't want to shame him. But this is a true statement. A very senior official or executive and basically said, listen, in PR, we don't get paid to win, we get paid to try. That's the story shaping mindset that was PR for a long period of time. That doesn't work today. That does not work today at all. And if you think it does, and some folks still may, we have to do more than try. We don't get paid to try anymore. We get paid to win. We get paid to deliver. We get paid to produce results that matter to the client. And if you're a client, you get paid to deliver results that matter to your business. They have to move needles that matter, not create impressions. And so the key is designing our programs to do that. But the only way we understand how to do that is by literally falling in love with data and numbers. Data is how we get there. It's how we craft the right solution. It's how we distribute the right solution. It's how we measure the impact of what we do. We have to get a lot more comfortable with data. Because honestly, if you're sitting around the table with your company's executives or your clients' executives, and they're talking business impact, you have to be able to say, here's what we did. So we need to design programs with the intent of moving needles that matter to the business, not old school metrics that frankly just don't matter anymore. There you have it. I hope this makes sense in some ways. We've come a long way in 20 years. We've come a long way in the past 10. We've come a long way in the past 5. And truth be told, we've probably come a long way in the past year alone. I know we have. Companies, every company on the face of the planet has had to adjust on the fly. They've had to take plans that they had and drop them all together, reorient their business, rethink business models, and go to market in a very different world. And you know what? Communications professionals have helped facilitate that. They've helped communicate that. They've helped deliver on that. Now is our time to prove the value that we can create, not just in a crisis, but on a day-to-day basis. So I encourage you all, please get familiar with data, the role that it can play in shaping a story, the role that it can play in telling a story, and the role it can play and does play in proving how much value you create on a day-to-day basis. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Hi, Rick. Thanks so much for joining us on this live session. And what an insightful, session that you gave us just now on, around how storytelling is really evolving in the digital world, and especially keeping in mind what we've seen in the past year, when it comes to the social media piece, which has become so much more stronger with, a lot of shrinkage happening within within traditional media. I have a couple of questions that I jotted down, which I will, which I'm keen for you to answer. What I'm hoping to, if we do have any questions from the audiences, I will put those across to you as well. After I'm through the session that we have, right?
Yeah.
So Rick, tell me, what is an optimal balance between traditional media and new age media? Do brands need an integrated outreach, or do you think that if brands completely focus on just one part of the media, does that work? What is a good and optimal balance that brands can actually look at when it comes to creating very impactful campaigns?
It's a great question, and let me say I'm delighted to be here live. It's very early here in Arizona and Saturday morning, but I am delighted to be here live with you, and I've wanted to be at the Spectra show for a long time. In terms of is there an optimal mix or something? The answer is no. The reality is every brand is different, and every brand, every product is different, every business is different, and we all have different target audiences. And the key today, especially in an era of increased personalization where everybody's expecting to have something that is delivered specifically to them, I think that it's important to understand the media consumption habits of exactly who it is you're trying to reach and figure out the best way to get them. And omni-channel is definitely a way to go. And if you consider that, depending on the country that you happen to be in, as much as 30 or 50% of total media consumption is actually driven through social media. We have to think of all of that. But if you're looking at a millennial, you'll have a very different media mix than you will if you're looking at a senior. And I think that you need to understand exactly who you're after and what they're looking at and how best to go about tracking them down. And then find a way to break through, which is an entirely different thing.
Absolutely. So you spoke about both aspects, right? The customer experience, and you spoke about the other side of it, which is basically segmenting your audiences, right? Tell me, in terms, when I'm thinking about it, how, especially keeping in mind the year that we've seen gone by, we are so digitally connected. How are customer experiences getting impacted in a more and more connected digital? There's everything we say, do. Anybody who has a mobile phone in their hand is actually a customer and can impact your brand in any possible manner, right? How do you think our customer experience is really getting impacted in a very digital connected world?
It's funny. I was reading about this just yesterday. There's a new McKinsey study that's out, and they're talking about sort of the increased automation of everything. And one of the things the pandemic has done is drive a dramatic acceleration of the digitization of customer experience. And I think that we're only going to see more and more of that. The challenge is that the classic bot, if you will, the classic interface that we have to deal with a lot of the things that we see online is just not personal. It's not human and lacks empathy. And I think that the companies that can build in smart interfaces and smart exchanges as they digitize are the companies that will ultimately win. Everyone's thinking through the consumer lens right now, but I do think that the bot experience is just terrible, and the inability to access humans when you want them is also a struggle, but it's one that we're getting used to. And I think here again, I think you've got a big age split in the population, whereas someone that's as old as me likes human interaction, and the average person under 30 has no care whatsoever if they ever talk to a human at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can completely relate to that, right? I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I just want to, I'm a mother of two boys, and something that has been, we've seen a lot of it happening in schools now is that, there's more and more awareness being created about, about social and the risks that it contains, and it can pose to, anybody at any age group, right? And then there are documentaries like Social Dilemma that we've seen, which has also talked about the perils of social media. To your mind, when, do you think social media at any point in time will reach some sort of a tipping point?
I think it's reached a lot of tipping points already. The question is, what we're talking about. If you think about the early days, and I was there, we went from a very small and organic base of 1 million bloggers, as less than 20 years ago, to 3.5 billion people or more being connected on various platforms. And so it's been a very accelerated pace. But you go from there, where it was really the idea of community starting there, then the next sort of major tipping point was monetization, right? And then the monetization of the platforms led to all this, micro targeting capability, and the selling of data became part of that, not just advertising. And sort of the personalization, the ability to sort of really zero in on individuals, and honestly, the invasion of privacy that creates. And then I think the politicization of it, at least in certain markets, has become, using all that data for purposes that aren't necessarily beneficial to society, but all in self-interest. And I think that you started to see a lot of that come out in political campaigns, but also on the part of some brands. And then I think as where we are as of last night, with the president being suspended from 2 major platforms for life. And I think that is an indication that maybe, just maybe, the platforms are starting to take responsibility for some of their role in the destruction that we see in some of our cultures because of social. And so it is, we're nowhere near where we need to be on that point yet, but it's a very, it's a tough thing. And I think for a parent of young children or teenage children or whatever, it would be troubling because I think they're free to do whatever they want. And the world of TikTok is a very different world than the world that we grew up in,
Absolutely. But tell me from your experience and, from the fact that you've seen this evolve over the past many years, do you believe that, the negative, does it anytime click you that, the negatives that social media may actually overcome its positives that we see it as today for brands?
Well, those who know me would say I'm the eternal optimist. And so I have to believe that, the value that we see in social will ultimately come back and will be moderated, and or because we choose to, we will find platforms that exist where, whether they be Pollyanna-ish, if you will, or not, the reality is that there'll be places where bad news is filtered out. And I do think that we'll start to see some of that, but it's I don't hold out a lot of hope for the broader platforms. I think they've gotten too big. I think there's too much to control, and short of kicking half the users off, I don't see how that's going to happen.
Okay, interesting. So, Rick, in the previous question you did, when you were answering that question, you did talk about, modernization and new technologies coming in when we are talking specifically about social media. And in fact, there's an audience question from Amit as well on it, where what we want to understand is that, when we look at emerging technologies like AI, RPA, QR codes, augmented reality, analytics, what technologies, are really finding pace and impacting, the whole digital story, scenario, and impacting customer experiences in return. So where do you see, what technologies are going to play an important role, and how do you see them impacting customer experiences in the coming years?
It's a great question. The interesting thing is there are so many different technologies out there, and more will be introduced every day. And we're testing new ones all the time. The reality is that it's hard to find technology, regardless of the technology you use. Let's put it this way: you cannot substitute technology for human insight and intervention. And so as you're looking at the data that's out there, the key thing is to sort of understand that you have this pool of data available to you, and then how best to use it. Because a lot of what we've done classically, as you know, is we might go out and do a survey of 300 people or 1,000 people, and then extrapolate that and say this projects to the total population and so on. Whereas the flip side is, if you're actually building programs, and actually one of the programs I worked on a couple of years ago was for one of your products. And we actually went out and listened to millions of conversations about women with metastatic breast cancer, and understanding specifically about what mattered to them and how they felt about the pink movement, if you will. And the reality is they felt very alone, because it's not something that they can relate to, because there is no cure. And so it's like, once you understand, if you can sort of listen to all that, the more data that you have, the more you can sort of find that little needle in the haystack that can give you a kernel of insight. But it really does come from thinking, being able to sort of analyze vast amounts of data. And so what it really I think brings down to it from a PR perspective, or a marketing or communications perspective, is we really need to think like anthropologists. We need to sort of stop looking at individual data points and saying, I can turn this into a news story, and say, okay, let's look at all of this and say, what does it mean?
That's interesting. What does it mean? That's my take back. That's something that we all should be asking ourselves, I think. You spoke about the fact that, how the entire consumer experience piece, and how analytics can actually be, good insights from analytics can be able to make an impact on how you are really building your marketing and your communication, your PR campaigns. Whenever we talk about social media, largely the focus that at least I have seen is largely on external, is on consumers, is on other stakeholders, investors, business community and everything. What, to your mind, and how do you think that we can use social media to be able to actually drive internal messages for, within your organization, cultural building within your organization? Have you seen that? Do you have any examples that you've probably seen that happen recently, or any thoughts on that you'd like to
share? It's funny. I mean, I think there's social media and digital and employee communications has never been more important, right? If you think about within our own team and our own company, we're struggling with this right now, as many companies are, as we all work from home. And I think that, how do you maintain a culture in a distributed world, where you've got all these employees scattered all over the place, as opposed to sort of in the office per se? And it becomes critically important to use social the right way. And so we've basically, and I think other companies are doing the same. There's social as a means of advocating for a brand, or helping to sort of promote your culture and so on. But there's also social as a means of engaging audience. And so we tend to use ourselves Instagram a lot. We use LinkedIn for thought leadership and sort of talking and having, promoting our employees' points of view and so on. We put out an awful lot of content writ large, but then the flip side of that is Instagram is where the fun is, and I think that a lot of our folks really engage in that. And if you look at a lot of companies' social media profiles, it's the same thing. The people that are liking the content and sharing and engaging with the content that you put out are quite often employees. So reinforcing that behavior, I think, is super important. But it's also, I think, if you want to use it as a culture building tool, it's important that the executives get involved as well, and they see others, because that their behavior will impact the attitudes and behaviors of everybody else.
They need to walk the talk, and they can really set the tone for how and what should be really talked about when it comes to social media, right?
100%.
Yep, that's a great perspective, actually. I think we are almost on top of the hour, and I want to ensure that I ask you this question, because it's been on my mind since you said TikTok. Is that we've seen a lot of user-generated content coming to mainstream. And there are so many platforms that people are leveraging, and people are able to actually use and make their content available for for people to view. How much control eventually will brands have on their storytelling? And do you believe that user generated content can actually become mainstream?
Well, I think it already is. I really do. I think that brands that aspire to control 100% of their content are delusional. The reality is, brands are, look at what happened with Ocean Spray, and a skateboarder in Idaho going down the road, lip syncing a Fleetwood Mac song with a bottle of Ocean Spray, and Ocean Spray has never had that much publicity ever.
Yeah.
And somebody in the middle of nowhere running down a road in Idaho happens to generate billions of impressions for them. So they have no control over that whatsoever. So the trick is, from a brand perspective, is, do you connect with an audience, and are you at least part of the conversation, and aware of what what people are doing. And it's not newsjacking or anything else. It's if you empower people to do this and then recognize them as Ocean Spray did, I think quite brilliantly, by the way, in terms of giving the guy a truck. That's that you couldn't buy better publicity than that. Literally, and
it's direct endorsement.
Nor could an agency create it. This is just a customer doing what they want to do and having a great time with it. And it went viral, and so the old adage of, make me go viral, I can't. People can. Mm-hmm. That's why UGC is so important.
Absolutely. This has been absolutely wonderful, Rick, and I truly appreciate the time that you've been able to spend with us and all our audience who's watching this Q&A live. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much again. And I look forward to connecting with you again.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and blessings to all of you.
Thank you.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.